Just for your viewers out there, I know one of the individuals who we just saw getting vaccinated is planning on traveling after the second dose. This is a source of confusion, but no, this is one of the misperceptions here. Just because you get vaccinated with that second dose does not mean you should be participating in things like traveling in the middle of an out-of-control pandemic, or that you're liberated from masks. Mm-hmm. Everything still applies until all of us get the 2-dose regimen. And we don't think that's going to happen until June, July. And again, this goes back to what we just talked about, Chuck. We don't know if just getting the vaccination prevents serious illness, or does it also prevent you from getting infection entirely, meaning you can still get infected with the virus potentially and pass it on to others. So really, really critical. Don't let your guard down just because you got vaccinated. You still might be able to get infected with the virus and pass on others. So please keep that in mind.
So there's a lot they don't know, and the response to what they don't know is you can't have basic liberties and freedoms back. You can't live your life because they don't know. So let's just err on the side of continued isolation, depression, destruction of small businesses till at least next summer, until the virus is zero. None of us are safe. None of us are safe. This mentality is outrageous. Unfortunately, it is the consensus mentality among the elites, among Democrats, among social media giants. They will censor you, as they have done to me, for even questioning this. We got another buddy, though, who also questions it and sees the damage, the devastation across the country and in his hometown area of Boston. Gerry Callahan is with us now. He is the host of the Gerry Callahan Podcast, longtime Boston radio legend. Gerry, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Buck. How's it going?
I'm all right, man, but I'm worried because I think that the lockdown left is already showing us that they have no intention of letting us start to go back to normal life until at least next summer. And others are saying until this time next year already. And it seems to me that no matter how much we can show that the data doesn't support some of the things they're doing, and what they're doing is catastrophic for millions of people who are going bankrupt, their businesses are going under, they just don't seem to care, Gerry. They think they've got all the answers.
It is frightening, Buck, and it's getting worse. And today on my podcast, we came up with a new word. We've heard of Karens. We all know what a Karen is. Well, now we have Guptas. Guptas are cable TV doctors who don't ever want this to end, who are literally telling us you will not be liberated. I mean, that's kind of a scary word. It should be, at least, that we're not going to liberate you from all these restrictions and these rules. And you're going to have to continue wearing a mask, and you're going to have to stay out of restaurants and bars and don't travel. I mean, he literally says you're not going to be able to travel even after you get the vaccine. Well, what is the point of the vaccine? It's bizarre. And I think you and I have agreed on this for a while now, that they're never going to let this go. They're going to continue to try to keep us under their control forever.
Well, that's where I wanted to go next, because I think that we should establish a kind of philosophical understanding right now of what we're actually facing here. Because let's just say, for example, that we were to listen to everything that these various blue check MDs who go on the different cable channels, the Dr. Fauci, who I honestly think is a disaster, and just, sure. I don't know if he's not that bright. I don't know what his problem is. His judgment is horrible. I think it's more that he's a coward, actually, than he's dumb. But you look at where this all goes, Gerry, and the moment that we start seeing stories in, let's say, May or June about, there's going to be some relaxation, the cases are way down, we've got, 50 million Americans vaccinated, 100 million Americans vaccinated. I can almost see right now, you're going to see stories about, but what about mutations? What about COVID-20? What about COVID-21? We have to keep these things, ready to go here, because and then I think people realize that if there's a zero risk to your health standard that these people can enforce and shut down your business and keep you away from relatives on the holidays, if that's the standard, they can use that standard going forward for other things too.
Yeah, and once they're done with the mutations of the virus, and I know what we're moving on to. And John Kerry will be leading the way, and it'll be, we have to do these things to control climate change. It's for your own good. And I'm telling you, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Buck, because you're in New York City, I'm in Boston. I'm kind of disappointed in the level of compliance and the docile submission of so many people. I'm out every day. I'm running or walking the dog, and when I'm by myself, I'm not wearing a mask because why would I? Let me tell you, everybody else is. They are all going along with this, and they're accepting these measures, even if they make no sense. See, it's one thing if they tell you you must do whatever because of this reason, and they give it and they explain it. Well, here's what happened yesterday in Boston. The mayor shut all gyms for the next 3 weeks. I mean, they'd already been living with all kinds of restrictions and limited hours and space. And he just said, we're going to close all gyms for 3 weeks. And you know what the reason is? He didn't have one. He literally does not have one. They're not a hotspot. They're not a vector. I could give you the numbers. It's unbelievable. They do not. There's no evidence that the virus is transmitted in gyms. He just said, we're locking you down because that's what we did last time we did a lockdown, and we're going to follow that protocol. So he puts people out of work, puts people out of business, essentially, 10 days before Christmas, and doesn't really give them a reason. And if that doesn't outrage, I mean, it should outrage everyone as much as it does me and you, and it doesn't, and that, I don't know, that just bothers me.
Well, one thing I think, and we're speaking to Gerry Callahan. He is the host of the Gerry Callahan Podcast, longtime Boston radio legend. Gerry, we've had a couple things coinciding here. One is that the lockdown left turned this into a kind of anti-Trump thing, that this was about, that there was this political separation. And that's why I'm running around now saying, forget about Trump. This isn't about Trump. This is about freedom. This is about what's true. This is about free discourse and individual liberty and businesses that should be surviving. And there's still this mentality, I think, of, oh no, but that's what Trumpers say or something. It has nothing to do, in my mind, this has nothing to do with Trump. This is about what's true and what's happening around us. And then there's also the most concerted suppression campaign I've ever seen in social media. I mean, I've been formally reprimanded by the social media giants for sharing CDC studies, for sharing things that I just say, well, look at this. Doesn't this raise the following questions? And they'll put these, fact checks that aren't actually checking any facts. They just say, well, this lacks context. Dr. Fauci said otherwise. Oh, I'm sorry. So now if Dr. Fauci says something, it's a fact check. That's fascinating because he told us at the beginning of the pandemic, when this was considered to be far more dangerous, actually, by the individual case fatality that it was, don't wear masks. That was Fauci this year, but now he's a one-man fact check. Oh, that's fascinating.
He told us on March 9th, Buck, to don't hesitate to go on a cruise. Dr. Fauci told us to go ahead, go on a cruise, have fun. And by the way, go on Tinder and find love if that's what you're looking for. Dr. Fauci gave you his blessing, and we know he's been wrong about everything, and yet you can't challenge him. It is bizarre, and to me, it flies in the face of what we see every day on the streets. I'm walking around, you're walking around, you're seeing these restaurants and businesses and gyms just closed up, boarded up, gone forever. So you try to point out this real ancillary effects here, this real collateral damage, and it's like, yeah, but it's a virus, or people, they give you the number, 3,000 dead, and you say, but do you know how many people are unemployed or on drugs or alcohol, or their business is destroyed? And it's almost irrelevant. They don't want to hear it. They just say, yeah, but the virus. It's like the only thing that matters when your eyeballs tell you that there's a lot of other things going on that just are really, really bad for society as a whole.
What are you seeing in Boston about this? Because in New York, we've had a couple of people, and in New Jersey too. In New Jersey, there's Atlas Gym. They've been telling everyone they got a $1.2 million and counting fines from the city, from the state of New Jersey. In New York, we had this pub and restaurant on Staten Island where the guys wouldn't shut down, even though they were told they were in the red zone or the orange zone or whatever it was. And
we call those babies. Pete Davidson and I say they're a bunch of babies. But go ahead.
Yeah, I heard that guy. It's nice if you're in media and making a ton of money and can work remotely and or not have to worry about a paycheck at all, that you get to just tell people that are losing their businesses, losing decades of work in some cases. And the other thing that I would say, Gerry, is that when we see this, The chance that any one individual restaurant is a real problem in this pandemic, based on New York City's official numbers, is very, very low. They say they think there's 1% of the spread they can trace to restaurants. 1%? We're shutting down 10,000 restaurants?
It's much like the gyms. They don't, like that Antilles gym. They have zero. They've had zero members test positive. And they've had something like 1 million visits since they opened up illegally. But you're right, restaurants, it's like 1%. Gyms, it's much, much less than 1%. So again, they're telling you to do things that make no sense. It's one thing to tell you to do something. It's another thing to not give you a reason. It's the same thing here. They came up with these new rules because there was a spike, and we know that most of the cases are at home or nursing homes or hospitals. So they decide, here's an idea. Let's make everyone go home and get out of the restaurants and get out of the gyms. And here yesterday, the restaurants were already operating at a limited capacity. Yesterday, they closed all bar seating. No reason given, just we decided we have to do something here to make it look like we're trying to protect you from the evil virus. So we're not going to let people sit at the bar anymore. And they're just going to keep coming up with new measures until every damn restaurant is gone. I mean, the last number I saw was 5,000 restaurants in the state, restaurants and bars that have gone under. It's obviously higher in New York and across the country. And it doesn't seem to affect these public office holders who risk nothing, who sacrifice nothing. They just sit there in their office and say, you know what, I'm just going to put another 1,000 people out of business and put another countless thousands of people out of work before Christmas, and they don't bat an eye. It's remarkable.
It is. Gerry Callahan, I'm with you on this stuff, man. Keep the faith and hold strong up there in Boston. Go check out the Gerry Callahan Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Gerry, thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Buck. Good talking to you.
I know this holiday period is different than normal ones, and it's a bit more difficult. You may not be able to see people that you're used to seeing. There are all these restrictions on us, and we can feel a bit separated from each other. But with BloomsyBox, you can send holiday cheer, love, and affection to people that matter most to you and really brighten up their day. These are incredible flowers cut fresh from the farm and sent right to your home or the home of whoever you want to gift them to. I've got a gift subscription right now for my girlfriend. She loves getting these BloomsyBox flowers. But if you've got a relative or a friend you're not going to see this holiday season, guess what? Send them a BloomsyBox bouquet. These arrangements are gorgeous. All you have to do is go to BloomsyBox.com and use the promo code BUCK. That'll get you 15% off and free shipping. That's BloomsyBox, BLOOMSY, BloomsyBox.com, promo code BUCK for 15% off, and we'll get you free shipping. Send somebody some beautiful flowers this holiday season with BloomsyBox.
Yesterday, the United States witnessed a medical miracle. The first doses of a COVID vaccine were administered to frontline workers across the country. The president promised a safe and effective vaccine in record time, and President Trump delivered. Earlier this year, we heard from several news outlets and so-called fact checks that President Trump would need, quote, a miracle to be right. That was an NBC News article. We were told, according to Healthline, quote, a vaccine will still take more than a year to develop. USA Today warned us that, quote, despite medical researchers' progress, a vaccine, quote, was more than a year away. And National Geographic even told us that achieving a vaccine within, quote, a year to 18 months would be absolutely unprecedented, end quote. These reports deserve their own fact check. False.
Indeed. And we see once again how fact-checking is abused by libs. How fact-checking isn't really about facts. It's just a way to try to add additional gravitas to their opinions and to use it to silence opinions they don't like. Oh, we did a fact check and we're right and you're wrong. We fact-checked Trump and here's what we found. How do you fact-check a prediction? Did anyone ever think about this? How do you fact check a prediction? Does that ever occur to the people that are trying to do this stuff? You can't. right? If I told you that the stock market was going to be down 50% in 6 months, you can't fact check me on that. Hopefully that doesn't happen, by the way, because nobody knows. Not possible to fact check it. So what they do is they call it a fact check. Then they'll say experts disagree. That's not a fact. They conflate these things. They do this intentionally. The media did this about the vaccine. And this, yes, certainly had some impact on the election. We had a lot of people who were being told all year, you can't expect that there'll be a vaccine because the media is telling you that Trump is lying and Trump's never going to get a vaccine done. That's what they were saying. And then we turn around and say, well, hold on a second. What would perception have been? What would people have been thinking was likely to happen by the end of the year in terms of the election if they believed that a vaccine was on the way and would be here in December, as it is? As this is now, the fact is that it is here. Do they feel any sense of remorse or any sense of embarrassment for getting this wrong? No, of course not. They did it for a reason. And unfortunately, the reason was to stop Trump from winning this election. So they view this probably as a big success. They got away with yet another lie. Russia collusion was a lie, but did it work for the Democrats? Trump is trying to destroy the post office was a lie, but did it work? And now we have the vaccine coming this year. They said it would never happen. Who was right? Who was wrong? Got to pay attention to this stuff. Got to remember it, too. Because these are the people who will turn around now. I mean, this is the same news media that is going to say that we should all, respect our journos. And they're going to try this whole game of, now we can finally trust them. Now we can finally trust them. No, we actually cannot trust them. We cannot. And it's because they've shown us who they are. Here's among the most preposterous, the most vain, ignorant, and worthless of the journos, because he's just a journalist, man. Jim Acosta, he's just a journalist. This guy managed to build a career around Trump hatred and then acts like he's honest and ethical as a journo. I mean, it's absurd. This is what he yells at the White House press secretary after she leaves the podium, like the sniveling little coward he is. Play 3.
Really interesting turn of events, and good for those who covered what was a story all along and not Russia disinformation.
Isn't it hypocritical for you to accuse others of disinformation when you spread it every day?
You hear that nasty little... It's like he's like a mean girl in high school. Isn't it hypocritical for you to say this when you spread disinformation every day? This is CNN's White House correspondent, senior White House correspondent. But we're supposed to take him seriously now. I don't know if anyone takes Don Lemon seriously, but here he is talking about the White House press secretary 13.
He's still pursuing ongoing litigation at the moment.
She also works with a girl. Bye. I mean, if there's no other girl, bye. Bye-bye.
That's all he's got for her. That's how respectful they are of the White House press secretary. That's how respectful they are of the process and the sacred norms of our democracy. These journalists make a mockery of their profession on a regular basis, and then they turn around and they expect the rest of us to give them respect. They expect us to treat their pronouncements as though they don't come from a place of ignorance, partisanship, bitterness, vanity. Yeah. Those are the defining characteristics of the modern political media these days. That's what they actually show us day in and day out. So I think we should treat them as such. I have absolutely no desire, no plan, no willingness to pretend that the journos are somehow going to get better in the next 4 years. I think we all know they're only going to get worse, and they deserve to be held to account. And that means substantial amounts of mockery and ridicule, because that's what really bothers them. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you, because it goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they find your home's title online. Then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and take out loans against the equity in your home. You often won't find out about this until you receive payment demands in the mail, perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You have to take action now to protect your home's title with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock can create a virtual barrier around your home's title. The moment there's any tampering detected, you will get a notification and they can shut it down. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO. That'll get you 30 free days of protection, and you can check at the site to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. That will get you 30 free days of protection, and you can check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. Georgia Senate runoffs just a few weeks away. As I've been telling you, this is absolutely critical. I want to get the most up-to-date information on this possible to all of you. For that, we bring in our friend Ryan Girdusky. He's the author of They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution, and he is a political big brain. He's going to tell us what's going on here. Ryan, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
What is happening right now with the early vote in Georgia? Tell us.
So as of right now, 750, as of this morning, 715,000 rather, people have voted in the state of Georgia. Georgia is one of the states, like many, that do not register people by party. So we don't know what person's party has come out and vote, but we do know their age and their race. So about 54.5% have been a non-Hispanic white, 33.1% have been non-Hispanic black. Most of the people are 49% of all those who have voted are over the age of 65. And most interestingly, about a little over 18,500 are people who did not vote in the 2020 general election. They're new voters.
So how's it looking right now for Loeffler and Perdue, the Republican candidates?
Well, ideally for Republicans, you want the black vote because blacks vote 90% or above. For the Democrats, you would like the black vote to be under 30%. They're at 33.1. It's been dropping every day. It was over 38% the first day. So the energy and momentum for a huge surge of Stacey Abrams voters, especially in the Atlanta metro area, has kind of diminished somewhat slightly as days go by. Now, one thing I've learned covering Georgia is that Stacey Abrams has a tendency to take credit for everything, either she does it or she doesn't do it. So Stacey
you mean the governor of Georgia, Ryan?
the governor of Georgia, exactly.
The fake governor of Georgia, yeah.
So she was talking about how she was getting 1.3 million absentee ballots out. A majority of those actually came from senior citizens, military personnel, and disabled who automatically get ballots. So they were not anyone that she was requesting for a ballot. They were people who would get ballots normally under Georgia law. As of right now, 1.6 million people total have requested absentee ballots, which, by the way, is crazy high. It's going to be a huge runoff election, much higher than past runoff elections.
So just so we can sort of some of the top line here, we have a Georgia runoff that is already showing that people are they're very focused on this. Ryan, I'm hearing from some folks on the right who don't want to say this that much publicly, but they are saying the Democrats could actually steal these two seats, that could happen, and everyone needs to take that very seriously. What do you say to that?
The law in Georgia the election laws in Georgia are probably some of the worst in the country, as far as I could tell. So, for instance, after it came out that Joe Biden was ahead in the vote count, Donald Trump requested a recount, which is perfectly legal for a loser to look for a recount. And they found between 3,000 or 4,000 more Trump votes during the recount in Georgia, which gave him a little bit of an edge, but it didn't put him over the number he needed to win. Now, if you remember, David Perdue was the winner of that election, but he didn't win enough he didn't get over 50% to avoid a runoff. So I simply asked, well, how much of those 3,000 or 4,000 did David Perdue get? And they said, oh, well, we can't count those because only the loser can request a recount. So they could not count any other of the votes besides the Donald Trump votes. So David Perdue very well could have ended up getting over 50% of the vote had he been able to request a recount, but he can't. because of Georgia state law.
So he may, and to be clear, this is not even a little bit beyond the realm of possibility what you're laying out here by the numbers. Purdue might have actually won enough to not even be in a runoff, but because of the Georgia laws, they weren't able to look for those irregularities that they did find for Trump that might have put Purdue over, so there's no runoff.
Correct. Yes, correct. And the Republicans would have the Senate.
Unbelievable.
Yes. It is the most insane series of laws you've ever heard of in your life. A big problem that I've raised to a lot of people is these these ballot drop-offs that they've been having. They have 20 in one county alone. And the question comes up of ballot harvesting. Now, it is illegal in the state of Georgia to ballot harvest. You can't deliver any other ballot besides your own. But the problem is under the law, written in the words in the Georgia law, is that you have to have two people witness you dropping off a ballot. Well, now because of COVID, they made these ballot drop-off boxes where you just walk into a box, you deliver it. But there's nobody watching these boxes to make sure that only one ballot is going in there at a time. They have a camera in these boxes, but the camera is only looking to see if someone, destroys the boxes, not if somebody delivers 50 or 60 ballots at one single time. There is so much money in Georgia, by the way, right now that Karl Rove could hire somebody to sit in front of every ballot drop-off place all day long, every single day, to make sure that no one's dropping off 60 or 70 ballots 30 times a day, but no one's doing that as of right now.
We're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, author of They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution, and he's a political analyst. Ryan, tell me this. What is the GOP not doing in Georgia? I mean, let's put aside the issue of fraud for a second. There's also the possibility, it seems, that maybe they could win these 2 Senate seats fair and square based on all the money and attention that these races are getting. What do you make of that risk, and what would you want to see the GOP and these candidates and Trump and Pence do to make sure that we don't lose Senate control? Because I can handle whatever the outcome of the presidential election is. I feel like we can weather that storm. It gets a lot harder to weather it if the Democrats have the House and the Senate.
Yeah, so I can't overemphasize how much money and people there are right now in Georgia. So far in Georgia, the Republicans, not the Democrats, just the Republicans, have knocked about 6 million doors, which is basically every one of their voters 5 times over. They've done a tremendous GOTV job. There's tons of money being poured in. One of the major problems of the Trump campaign was that they did not have any money in the Chattanooga media market. Now, the Chattanooga media market is only 2% of Georgia, but it's in the most Republican area of Georgia. So all 2% are heavily Republican. It's in the 9th congressional now Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district, the second most Republican district of the state and the most Republican area of that congressional district. She did not have a Democrat opponent in the general election, and there was about 70,000 fewer voters in her district than in the neighboring district. And those are 2 of the most Republican areas of the state. So I hope that those mistakes, and I've reached out to several super PACs working in the state, and I've told them, you need to make sure I know it's only 2% of the state, but it is an important 2% of the state for Republicans that you should be advertising. I know Mitch McConnell and Karl Rove are spending a lot of time and energy down there as well as Donald Trump Jr. The president had a huge turnout. Mike Pence's turnout has been fairly low, honestly, right now. It has not been that strong as far as turning out a lot of people to his rallies goes. But the problem is the messaging that Trump gave early on, that don't vote early, vote day of, I think was the wrong message to really have. I think that voting early is really, really important. Because you don't know what's going to happen on election day. You get sick, your kid gets sick, there's a snowstorm, there's a hurricane, whatever the case is, and you can't get to the polls. And Democrats are definitely utilizing this early ballot system. As far as the problems that went on last time, I think that there is a major issue right now with the Secretary of State's office. It's not just the Secretary of State who's incompetent, which he is. He's basically just a rich guy who wanted to run for governor one day. So he ran for Secretary of State as a platform to then run for governor with no experience being Secretary of State. The Deputy Secretary of State, her last name is Fouche. I forget her first name. I think it's Diane, but it might not be Diane. It's Fouche is the last name for that. She's been making a lot of the calls, and she's incredibly incompetent. Her big plan earlier this year was she wanted to have Cardi B cut commercials for the state to ask for poll watchers. Now, if you're a Republican, what kind of poll watchers is Cardi B going to attract to sit there and make sure everything's going okay for your election? This is what the state is right now in the Secretary of State's office. So there's very little confidence there. And basically, since the senators have both called on him to resign because of his incompetency with this election, he has kind of been blowing a lot of people off.
So would you say it's on track, or are you concerned now about these two Senate seats that will determine control of the United States Senate for the next 2 years?
Well, I'm concerned. I mean, the landmark poll just came out. It's a pretty good polling firm in Georgia as far as polls go, which a lot of them have been off, but it's a pretty good polling firm. And they both had Loeffler and Perdue up by 1 point. The attack ads against Perdue are very, very effective, and he's not been able to really respond to them. And the fact of the insider trading and selling so many stocks, it's been very, 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 very effective. Now, that being said, Ossoff is a known quantity in Georgia because of his congressional run, his high-profile congressional run, and he's pretty well hated throughout Georgia. Nonetheless, if they're able to sit there and surge these people out of the inner city, we'll see. I will say the one thing going for Loeffler and Perdue that was not going for Trump is they do not alienate suburban white voters in the same capacity. Perdue and Loeffler both overperformed Trump, and well, really Perdue because Loeffler had another Republican, but Perdue overperformed Trump in the 6th and 7th congressional district, which are the two suburban Atlanta congressional districts that flipped from Republican to Democrat since 2018.
Just switching gears before we let you go, we're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, author of They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution. Ryan, you and I have talked about this before, but I want you to lay it out for everybody. In the post-election analysis here, there was a problem for Trump with what was the primary? Was it white working class voters not turning out enough, or was it white college-educated suburban voters who either wouldn't vote for him or voted for Biden?
So the main problem with the Trump campaign was their idea always was, we're going to lose white college-educated voters. It's kind of baked in the bread. So we're going to make up for that by getting more minority voters out. Now, in a state like Florida and a state like Texas, that idea worked, and it worked very, very well. They did an excellent job. And they did an excellent job, by the way, in almost every major city: Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Cleveland, El Paso, Miami, all of these cities. Especially those that experienced surges of the Black Lives Matter riots, did vote more Republican, which was great. The problem is in places like Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, there just were not enough of those voters to make up for it. The only way you were going to make up for that surge of college educated whites voting Democrat was by getting non-college educated whites to vote Republican, and more of them, and registering them. There was never a ground game in place at all by any Republicans for the last 4 years. And I brought this idea to Brad Parscale back in 2017. I said there are 47 million non-college educated white Americans who are not registered to vote. If you register 10% of them, you don't have a problem. And most of those people, by the way, live in the Midwest. They live in the swing states that Trump flipped from Obama. So it's not impossible to sit there and win every one of those states all over again. This is the truth about campaigns when it comes to voter registrations. It's very difficult, and there's not a lot of money in it. So there's not a lot of consultants who want to go run a voter registration organization. And looking how Brad Parscale made a lot of money off that campaign, it seems like he kind of took that advice of, there's not a lot of money in voter registration, let's look at doing other things. So they chased phantom Hispanic voters in New Mexico for 3 years. And lo and behold, I mean, it just didn't work out. I'll say this one statistic for you before we go, because I know we're running out of time. There were 23 counties that flipped from Obama to Trump in Wisconsin. 22 of those 23 counties, Trump increased his percentage, and they had over 90% turnout. Basically, everybody you possibly want to do, they did. Great ground game. But the number of registered voters in those 23 counties decreased by 100,000, even though the population increased, because there was no effort on the part of the GOP to register new voters in those areas, especially those who've kind of fallen by the wayside, don't believe the politicians help them. That is the Roseanne voter, the shameless voter, those people, those kind of characters who are in our country who feel like government doesn't respond to their needs. They're the ones who need to be tapped into. And there was no effort on part of the GOP, the RNC, the Trump campaign, thanks to Jared Kushner, to reach out to those voters. They would have made the absolute difference. And voter fraud aside, he would have been able to win a bunch of those states that he lost.
Ryan Girdusky, check out his book, They're Not Listening, available on Amazon. Ryan, always insightful, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Shots have been administered. Hope is on the way. And our job here is to guarantee that there's enough money to facilitate the delivery, as well as to do other things that we can agree on. And as I've said repeatedly, number one, we're not leaving here without a COVID package. Not going to happen. We're going to stay here until we get a COVID package. No matter how long it takes, we'll be here until we get a COVID package.
They better get a COVID package. It's really, it's so shameful that we're at this point. We've gone this many months where the federal government, I'm just going to say it, the Congress, and even at some levels, the administration, yeah, that's right, the administration, not getting enough support to people who are suffering in these states where the lockdown libs are just making everything impossible. What are they supposed to do? You're not allowed to work. Not everyone has savings to, endure these tough times, right? So what is supposed to happen now? What's the reality of people's lives who don't get this assistance? McConnell tweeted this out earlier today. The American people need more help. We need vaccine distribution money. We need to re-up the Paycheck Protection Program to save jobs. We need to continue to provide for laid-off Americans. Congressional leaders are on both sides are working until we get this done. I mean, the fact that here we are, it's almost Christmas. They're almost going on vacation. They still haven't worked out this package because the vain, selfish, conniving Democrats and the somewhat ineffectual and incompetent Republicans can't figure this thing out. It really makes you wonder. They impoverish people. They destroy their businesses. They say they're going to send help, and then they don't send help. And they wonder why we have the feelings we do about politicians and about politics in this country. I'm sure they'll get some kind of a deal done, or I hope they'll get some kind of a deal done, but that it's taken this long in itself is a scandal and a disgrace, and we should remember that.